let's just jump right into the news.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. North and South America, all the ships and clippers at sea. Let's go to press. Fly.
First up in game news, we got some statistics for 2019 on Kickstarter. If you had to, this is maddening how huge this is. The amount of money that was pledged to successful Kickstarters for tabletop games, now that includes board games and RPGs, $176 million. Million dollars went to Kickstarter for that. Video games, $16 million. That's it. This is an article in Polygon that is talking about how huge it is. That's 6.8% higher than it was the previous year. It's huge. There were 433 more successful campaigns than the previous year, for a total of 3,734 successful campaigns. That's insane. That also means that people are getting better at kickstarting things. They're figuring out, okay, what is a reasonable goal to set for these games? What does a good campaign look like? People, there's fewer and fewer of the, you still see them when you browse Kickstarter, like, oh my God, what is this guy thinking? That makes, like, who would back this? There's fewer and fewer of those things. The biggest Kickstarters of the year were Etherfields, Bloodborne the board game, Trial by Trolley, Zombicide 2nd Edition, Reaper, Miniatures, Bones, BattleTech. So there's a lot of big things. Throw Burritos in there, though. Talked about that a little while ago.
Right. So, I mean, I'm sure there could be industry people that could talk more about this, but we're seeing Kickstarter continue to evolve. And I think part of that expansion you're seeing is that a lot of the industry that you might have considered like more traditional, not indie at all, is moving into Kickstarter.
Yeah, the number of traditional releases that are being done via Kickstarter as opposed to just the traditional release method is increasing.
I think Stronghold Games has talked about this, that they're going to be paring back the number of games that they make, and more of them are going to go through Kickstarter.
The Kickstarter process. Yeah.
Now, I don't know if that's bad news for your, brick and mortar game store, but I think I was listening to Steve Betancourt, right?
Yeah.
Talk about this, and he was talking about there's major problems in distribution in games right now, which is like a lot of times it's very hard. Like, you go to your friendly local game store, you may have big trouble getting the games you want that we're talking about on this podcast. Like, they're kind of these conventional distribution channels. But one of the things that Kickstarter does that's really good if you are a publisher is, like, you put a game out there on Kickstarter, and you are going to get a very accurate representation of the demand for that game, interest in that game and demand for that game, so that you, like, not only are you taking in money to, actually get the thing out and get it directly to fans, and that's a higher percentage of every dollar going directly to the designer and the publisher in this case, but it's also like, it's invaluable information to the publisher just in sense of, like, we now know how many games to make because of our Kickstarter campaign. Like, that is the most accurate information they're going to get for knowing how successful something's going to be.
So you're saying it's market analysis, essentially, is what it's doing.
Yeah, it's free market analysis.
Or not even free, subsidized.
Yeah,
right?
it works both as marketing and market analysis. And I think his point was just like, they can't afford to pass that up, and it just allows them to be more accurate, because, like, the thing that kills publishers is when they guess wrong.
Yes.
Like, you can have 5 profitable games wiped out by one unprofitable game in which they, made 20,000 units
sure this was going to be huge,
and sold 2, like, that can wipe out your entire year. And so, like, they have to avoid that at all costs. And Kickstarter helps them dial into the interest of something directly. And then hopefully that then filters down to the friendly local game store when it comes to, how many copies are going to be available through those mainstream distributors that are going to go out and disseminate through, the hundreds of game stores throughout the country. So, if you're looking at the list here, you're seeing Exploding Kittens, but you're also seeing Simon has 2 titles.
There's
on
a lot
this
of
list.
there's a lot of miniature games in here. That's for sure. There's a lot of sequel and branded properties on here. So, but that's the biggest ones. My question always.
I'm just saying, I think that trend's going to continue. You're going to see bigger players being involved in Kickstarter.
So my question is that one of the great things about Kickstarter is that it has allowed smaller, great designers to get games out there and to reach a larger public. The more the traditional publishers are putting their games on Kickstarter, it threatens possibly to drown out that, to have the traffic sort of overtake that, and all of a sudden, these smaller games that deserve more attention are getting
the
less
true
attention.
unknowns are probably going to get squeezed a lot more, right?
I think that might be so.
I mean, the Vita Lacerdas are not. Like they're gonna do fine. And by the way, it's not like we're saying this is it's certainly not what I'm saying, that this is the big trend. We're also seeing plenty of people move away from Kickstarter. Tim Fowers doesn't do Kickstarters anymore. Jamie Staminer used to be kind of like the expert on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
He's people
Decided
are going
not to do that.
Yeah, right. And for different reasons, I think with both of them. So it's not like this is one giant unifying trend, but we are seeing changes.
Yeah. My worry actually is more on the RPG side, because the indie RPGs are thriving on Kickstarter. It's been a huge boon to them because it was a very, very hard thing to distribute, to get people to know about your indie RPG, to get people to know what's going on with that.
You bypass all the gatekeepers.
You
go
really
directly to your audience. Yeah.
Oh my goodness! With PDF delivery, the cost of developing and putting out a game is nothing. And what you were just saying about, you get a really good idea of how many copies to print of a indie RPG. That's massive. That is massive, because when you go to a convention, you have no idea how many copies to bring, how many copies to sell, whether you sell out. If you've done Kickstarter already and you know this many PDFs were put out, you've got a really good idea. And for a small indie publisher, that's the world. That's the world. So I do hope that on the RPG side that they don't get that the traditional RPG publishers don't drown the indie RPG community to an extent where Kickstarter no longer works for them as well as it has, because it's a really good thing. Moving on. Next up, something there's a little kerfuffle about a game we don't love. Secret Hitler has run into a little problem. There is the Anti-Defamation Commission.
League. Isn't it?
Commission, because it's in Australia. It's an Australian Jewish group. They're calling on Amazon to stop selling Secret Hitler. They say they want the retailer to show respect to the survivors of the Holocaust, and they say using Hitler as a part of the board game is whitewashing his inhumane crimes. Is highly distasteful, and it shows that still today many do not understand the inexpressible horrors of the Holocaust. So we talked about this a little bit when we talked about Alexander Pfister. We talked about Maracaibo. There are games that are going to push people's buttons. There are historical periods. There are issues that you would set a game in that you run into a real risk of, well, how do we do a game that is set during the age of colonization and not deal with slavery, not deal with the subjugation of these people, not deal with any of these things? And by not dealing with them, are we whitewashing them? That was in Maracaibo. We were talking about that. Right. When we talk about Puerto Rico, the problem with the colonists, I totally understand.
Is it the same thing though? Is that the right comparison, Maracaibo to Secret Hitler?
I don't know. What are your thoughts on it?
Nice. My thoughts are, first, I think we would say you don't play Secret Hitler because there are better games that do the same thing. That would be my first cop out.
Yeah. No. We listen. Let's put it.
I think I'm the
clearly.
wrong person to make the defense of a game that I don't really like. I would point out that I think the game has some very interesting mechanisms that are designed to kind of recreate a liberal society succumbing to fascism and authoritarianism that are core parts of the game. So
A 2017 update of the game put out the images of Donald Trump, Mike Pence, and other members of the Trump administration
I'm offended by that.
as those characters. And the company website specifically says right there, it says, don't think that there is anything funny or cool about fascism, that they wanted it to be a fun game to play, but they do want it to be a game in which the goal of the game is to root out and stop.
Yeah, there's an inherent
fascism.
criticism of fascism in the game.
Yes.
Which is not really the case if we look at a lot of like the old school World War II, strategy games.
No.
Like you could totally just play the Nazis
Yes.
and, win. And there's no examination of, what's going into that war effort. Whereas I think Secret Hitler is an explicit, criticism of it in kind of a wicked, smirky way.
Which I think is where the problem comes in for the
Can
folks
you
that
have
are complaining.
a game that has Hitler in any part of it that has a fun tone,
or at least is ostensibly semi ahistorical, right? These people aren't attacking. They aren't attacking Barbarossa to Berlin. They're not attacking
all
a
games
war
that
game.
deal in abstraction. It's just a question of degree, right?
I suppose. I think at the end of the day, I am never going to tell anybody that you can't find this game objectionable. I don't think that's right. Whether or not it should rise to the point of a game being changed or being stop published, that is a different metric altogether. We'll see what happens in Australia. We'll see if Australian Amazon does anything about it. We'll see if the publisher does anything about it. I kind of agree with you, Trey, that in this particular case, I don't think that the game is an endorsement or an encouragement whatsoever of that. The game explicitly is anti-fascist and is creating that message, even if it's doing it in a fun social deduction way.
Right.
I still think that's the ultimate message of the game.
I would also say, like, I kind of don't know, and I'm having seen this article, it made me think.
Yeah.
I think like is it really okay to have kind of a yuck we're all fascist type of game about such a serious topic? I don't know, and I don't feel like I can't be an authority and say yes, this is okay. I don't know. It made me think.
Well, we do tend to play this game with our Jewish friends a lot. So maybe that's okay. Maybe that's not okay. I don't know. We're gonna move right on.
Moving on.
Arkwright. Arkwright is one of those games that Stefan Risthaus created the game, and it was kind of a near miss for us. It was a really interesting game, very deep, very heavy. We felt eventually, after playing it several times, that there was a little bit of an imbalance in
Paul
the game.
felt like he broke it, right? Like you guys felt like a dominant strategy.
We all, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Well, it wasn't. No, it
Maybe
wasn't
you
Paul.
broke, but it felt like there was a dominant strategy that had been identified by the group, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and we try as we might, we could not overcome that and beat it any other way. So it's very happy to hear that they're coming out with Arkwright, the card game. Now, how you turn a game that is that heavy, that deep, and has that much going on into a card game, I reserve judgment. I don't know. Can you do it? If you can, I thought the theme was great. I thought the world that it was in.
You liked making cutlery?
I liked early mechanization, and or the Industrial Revolution from the side of the factory manufacturers. I thought that was really interesting. I thought that the market in the game was cool and interesting. I thought that the choices were deep. If there wasn't a mechanism that was broken, or rather a strategy that was dominant. So I'm very, very hopeful that Arkwright, the card game, if it could deliver a media experience that is 2/3 as heavy and twice as balanced as Arkwright, I would buy it. And I would play it all the time. I would be a big, big fan of that. So we will see. That is Arkwright. Next up, we got some interesting news. We got Dominant Species. Dominant Species. Chad, the designer of Dominant Species, passed away this year. But what we can say is that his most popular game, the biggest seller game that he's ever had, I believe, is Dominant Species. And he was working before he died on a marine version, Dominant Species Marine. So dealing in the water and all of those species. We just found out that it is in the final art process. It is
what's this called?
Dominant Species: Marine. It is, GMT Games puts it out. They do mostly war games and 18xx type games. They put out the original Dominant Species. This is the game that Chad was working on, the last big thing that he was doing, and the early art that we're seeing looks really nice. And listen, Dominant Species is another one of those games. It's one of those games that we like a lot of things about it, but we don't love the game. And that's not all of us, by the way. Jennifer, it's one of her top 5 games of all time.
Mm-hmm.
So I really hope that this game comes out well. I really hope that this game is what we wanted Dominant Species to be.
We have a high opinion of the game. We just took issue with one particular thing and felt like it needed another pass on certain cards. But there was a lot that was really
amazing about it. Yeah. Totally agree.
Respect. Lots of respect.
Lots of respect. Yeah. For us, there was a take that element in the game that we felt was strangely punitive, out of place. It created a meta
with a lot of chance coming into it too,
yes,
in terms of what flipped and
exactly.
That kind of stuff.
It created a meta that kind of sabotaged the game for us. So hopefully, Dominant Species Marine might just even one or two tiny tweaks in terms of the way the game plays would completely ameliorate those concerns of ours. So we're looking forward to checking.
Yeah, because that's kind of what we were asking for. Is like we wanted almost like a revision.
Yeah.
Of the game with some tweaks, and like maybe this does that.
Yeah. I hope so.
Because it's a good game. It's a good
By the
game.
way, we didn't ask anybody. We asked ourselves. We said what would make this game better for us. But that's the case. Next up, interesting news from my perspective. There is a game that I kind of love. Like everybody, when you have a decent sized collection, you've been playing around for a while, you'll have a game that almost is great, and you kind of love it. For me, Maharaja is one of those games. Mm-hmm. Maharaja was a 2004 game. Wolfgang Kramer and Michael Kiesling. Wolfgang Kramer, what can you say about him? El Grande, blah, 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 blah. Michael Kiesling recently did Azul. And together they did Tikal, they did Mexica, they did Torres. They did a series of games that are all quite fantastic for their time. I don't think they aged the best, but they're still pretty great. Maharaja is getting a new release. They're going to be Cranial Creations is going to come out with a new edition sometime in 2020. New graphics, new components, and other changes. I think this is a game that was close to being amazing, but not quite. So hopefully those other changes will address just a few things. The idea is fairly simple. There is a Maharaja that is going to move around to these various cities. He's going to take a look at what he sees, and everybody that has done things to make that city amazing is going to score points. You're going to score points by building palaces in these various places. The interesting thing about the game, or at least one of the interesting things about the game, is that everybody has a special role. And your special role gives you an advantage in one way or another. And each round, you can choose a different special role, essentially. The turn order matters very much. So the people with the less great powers go early in the turn order and get an advantage that way. The people with the more special powers have some really game-breaking powers, but they come later in the turn order. One of the most interesting things, though, is there is a track that shows where the Maharaja is going to go next. And one of the actions you can take on your turn, besides build a building or build a palace or collect money or do all of this sort of stuff. One of the things you can do is you can monkey with that order. So everybody can be building and building and building in this particular city because the Maharaja is supposed to go there next. And if a person times it right and does it right, they can change the order. And all of a sudden, the Maharaja is not going there. The Maharaja is going over here. And it's going to be 2 more turns before the Maharaja gets to that place. Very interesting mechanic that created a lot of interesting choices. The problem I had with the game is that at the end of the day, it's a race game. It's the first person to blank number of it was either blank number of points or blank number of cities scored, something along those lines, would win the game. And it created situations where a good early play could sometimes pretty much seal the game because you could limp along at that point and people would have a hard time catching up with you. But I really like that game. I hope very much that the new edition comes out and crushes it, because it is one of those games that Trey, what did you think playing it? You remember it, don't you?
No, I was just looking it up here on BGG. I don't remember it at all. In fact, I was thinking of Taj Mahal in my head when you were describing it, but it's...
Well, Taj Mahal is set in the same place and the same period, and it does have a Maharaja that moves around, but he doesn't change places.
So no, I don't remember playing this.
There was also an expansion, or I guess an optional character that you could add to the game, and we found out that that character does not make the game better. That character is actually kind of broken in a weird sort of way. Next up, Gollum. Or Gollum? Gollum. It is Gollum.
Coven.
Flaminia Brasini, Virginio Schili, Simone Luciani. You know them. You love them.
You had me at Simone Luciani.
Right? Frankly, like, we could right now do a ranking of these Italian designers and just go through which ones they were on and which ones they weren't on. I think this is the dream team. I think Flaminia Brasini, Virginio Gili, and Simone Luciani are, about as good as it gets when you put them all together. These guys all did Grand Austria Hotel together, and now they're doing an engine building game called Gollum, based on the 16th century legend of the Gollum of Prague, an anthropomorphic creature that the Rabbi Lowe animated to creating a clay statue that protected his people. We're going to play the role of Kabbalists who create and grow these powerful and magical creatures that will be moved around the main places of a magical Prague under the control of their masters. But if a golem becomes too powerful, it'll destroy everything it encounters on its way. Interesting, right? The game plays over 5 rounds, and you're going to be able to take actions. My one worry about this is after having played Trismegistus, right? I wonder, what we discovered in Trismegistus is that if the theme of the game is impenetrable, if one does not understand why doing A means anything to B and how A to B to C work, the game can really become hard to understand and hard to get into. Kabbalistic sorcery could be in that same position. We'll see. But certainly, it looks really interesting. There are no
right. Is this another theme that justifies some mechanics that don't really map onto any narrative that we would normally understand? Like you have to come up with alchemy or sorcery.
A little bit, maybe.
Yeah, we'll see.
I mean, I would say this is the most fantasy game that they've ever done. It definitely seems more, it's, spells
obviously
and artifacts.
We're going to play it. Interesting to see it.
We will play it the day it comes out. If we can find it, we will grab it. There is no question that we'll be getting that. But it's interesting. They started off doing a lot of kind of more more traditional themes, right? Lorenzo, Il Magnifico, Italian Renaissance.
Yeah, they really games screwed up with that one.
Tons of those. Marco Polo, right? Nothing atypical about that as a theme. Grand Austria Hotel, running a hotel. It's all
that's pretty. There's not a whole lot of running hotel games.
Well, but it is. Well, I don't know. You think of container shipyard. It's a economic business thing where you're putting people in, you're taking people out. It kind of fits within that theme. I think that it's
not exactly trading in the Mediterranean though. Of
no
overdone genre.
Right, or
themes.
Flying Dragon Cities. This is a different theme, and they have been doing different.
Was that
themes.
a Blue Moon City?
Yes,
Slam.
it's a Blue
Okay,
Moon
what?
City.
Okay.
Yes,
Wow.
yes. I got no time for it. No time for it. And last but not least, just a little bit of fun. There's something on Kickstarter that just warmed the cockles of my heart, and I have to share it with you guys. This is a role-playing game situation here. There was a game called Metamorphosis Alpha. It was sort of one of the first science fiction RPGs. It was a TSR production that was done.
Oh, right. I'm looking at this art, and it's bringing back memories.
Really, really old school. Anyway, they've sort of redone it and re-released it, and what is up right now is a science fiction adventure for Metamorphosis Alpha called Doom on the Warden. And it is quite literally Tomb of Horrors in space. If you remember that much beloved, widely considered the worst adventure ever written.
What?
It's horrible.
Well, what John Wick has done kind of a famous post about.
Yes.
About Tomb of Horrors.
It's so horrible.
It's polarizing.
It's horrible.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's not meant to be played.
No, it's ridiculous. It is a catalog of no-win scenarios, piled one on top of the other, on top of the other. So if you like that, if you like OSR, old school Renaissance, if you like old school gaming, yeah, maybe this might be something to check out. At least read the Kickstarter. It's a fun read. Check it out and see what you think.
Hey, if you enjoyed that video, you very well might enjoy the other videos you now see being suggested to you on screen. Also, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could like, share, or subscribe to our Game Brain channel. Thanks so much.